Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode of Recovery Talk. This week I want to talk about something that I'm asked over and over and over, and that is, what do you do if you quote unquote recovered, or very often what is actually referred to as weight restored, on a low intake? Essentially, people are asking, what do I do if I missed my chance to increase during early recovery and now I'm here, my metabolism hasn't healed? And I want to offer some advice to people in this situation who have this fear that they quote unquote did recovery wrong and missed their chance somehow. And when I say recovered on a low intake, what is often more referred to is weight restored on a low intake, because these people will very often not really be fully recovered. So it would be more that they have restored weight whilst eating a low intake and while still being in saving mode. Because essentially many bodies will tend to prioritize weight gain anyways. So you can eat quite little in recovery but still put on weight. This does not happen to everyone. Some people generally will not put on weight in recovery unless they eat quite a high amount, especially if they already started increasing, right? So this is why people can be in early recovery and notice that they're gaining a lot of weight eating very little. But as they keep increasing, they need more and more to gain. But if you never do that increase, or maybe you are fluctuating between recover, restrict, right? So you're constantly having like maybe one day where you're eating a generous intake, then you're restricting the next day. So basically you're still in starvation mode. You're still in a place where your body hasn't detected that it's safe to increase metabolism. And first of all, I want to start with explaining to you guys a very interesting dilemma, or almost an oxymoron, that I see coming up amongst people in recovery. I see this with my clients all the time. And this is the resistance towards increasing intake in recovery, at the same time being terrified of recovering without fixing metabolism. So over and over, I will work with someone who the goal that we're working towards is increasing intake, right? And the person will be terrified of increasing their intake. At the same time, they will also be terrified of being recovered on a low intake, at the same time as they are scared of increasing that intake, right? So can you see the paradox here? And this just illustrates how little sense an eating disorder is actually making. It is giving disorganized attachment energy. It's like, I want love, but I'm terrified of love, right? And in a way, this is very common in recovery. You know, someone can be like, I want recovery, but I'm terrified of recovery. But isn't it interesting how someone can be terrified of recovering on a lower intake whilst at the same time being terrified of increasing that low intake? So let's start with unpacking these two seemingly opposing fears. So fears of increasing one's intake in recovery is very often fear of discomfort, right? People are scared that they won't handle it somehow. And also they fear that recovery will quote unquote go too fast if they do. This is despite the fact that when you are eating more in recovery, that doesn't necessarily always equate to a faster weight gain. It may in the beginning, but what happens is that your metabolism adapts, right? And this is where some people also enter hypermetabolism, where they need to eat thousands and thousands of calories to put on any weight. I thought that this could not happen to me because I gained a lot of weight on very little calories when I started recovery. And also I had a point where I was not really in recovery. I was just on a point where I kind of tried to slightly increase my intake from very low to still very low, but slightly more. And I gained a lot of weight very fast doing so. So I assumed that my metabolism was just broken. This just shows that I can never really increase. I need to eat very little for the rest of my life because I'm gaining so much, eating such a small amount of increase, right? Then how on earth am I supposed to do what these other people in recovery are doing, or eating 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 8,000 calories? Doesn't apply to me. The unicorn syndrome is often the norm in recovery. And if you don't know what I mean when I say the unicorn syndrome, definitely listen to my episode where I touch upon this random term that I coined that illustrates so much of what's going on in recovery. That episode is literally just called the unicorn syndrome. So yeah. Anyways, let's get back into it. Basically, people often fear increasing because they fear that recovery will quote unquote go too fast, right? Whilst actually is not really how it works, because interestingly enough, what I often see when I work with clients who are increasing their intake, right, is that it almost starts going so slow, like they start gaining slow even though they have increased, because their metabolism speeds up, their body start trusting them, and it's kind of like, okay, we know food is coming in now, so we don't have to like hyper prioritize weight gain. Yeah, we prioritize weight gain as well, right? But there are other things to prioritize as well. Whilst if you are starved and you're giving your body more energy, then in the beginning it will tend to prioritize weight gain. And of course, a lot of it also is, water retention. A lot of it also is, more food in your stomach and system, and delayed gastric emptying, etc., etc. We know this. But overall, the mistake people do, they equate the rapid weight gain in early recovery as an indicator that if they keep eating more, this rapid pace will just continue, when that is actually not true. It will slow down, but it will only slow down if you actually signalize to your body that it's safe to slow it down. So this is why a lot of people can go through an endless cycle of restricting, then eating a little bit more, having maybe a good day in recovery, and then restricting, panicking the next day, eating more, whoopsie, then purging, and the weight gain kind of consistently goes up because your body hasn't detected that anything else is safe. Your body is basically getting signals every day or every second day or every third day that, oh shit, there's still a famine going on. Let's store up weight for the famine, right? So your body needs to learn to trust you before it can slow down the weight gain, and also use energy and other things such as increasing your metabolism. Increasing your metabolism is a luxury activity that comes when you actually have enough energy for the body to do it. I always use the metaphor of, electricity and running a house. If you are on a very tight budget, chances are you're not going to be able to afford firing up the heating on full speed when you're freezing, right? Especially not if you are in the UK like me, because our heating prices, it's insane. It is insane. So yeah, fear of it going too fast. And then also it is the good old eating disorder fears of, eating more, I'm being greedy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, There's virtue in eating less. All of these sneaky little things coming in. And also, of course, orthorexia rules. I need to eat low energy foods. A lot of just sneaky little eating disorder rules coming in, telling you, basically concluding that being restrictive is a very good idea. Or even if you're not restrictive, you may be excessively exercising, which equates to restriction. Or you may be purging, also it's a restrictive behavior intended to basically reduce energy coming in. How effective, if for instance, purging, laxative abuse is, we can really debate how effective it is, right? But what we do know is that it makes the body panic. People often think, I'll do recovery, but I will do it a little bit on the eating disorders terms so that I feel more comfortable. But that is not really possible. You can't do recovery and please your eating disorder at the same time. And if you are, is that really recovery? And exactly this is something I want to make you guys a little bit mindful of when I move over to the next part of this little paradox of recovery, right? Where someone is terrified of increasing their intake, but terrified of recovering on a lower intake. And that is, why are people with eating disorders, when they're often so scared of increasing, why are they also so scared of recovering on a lower intake? That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, it doesn't really make any sense, but let's unpack it. Let's see what flawed logic is behind this. Very often people in recovery, they have this idea that, okay, if I'm going to recover, it needs to be fully worth it. It can't be a waste, right? And of course, the same logic doesn't apply to the eating disorder. You would have think, well, I'm going to have an eating disorder, it can't be waste, it needs to be great. But it's never great, right? So essentially, they think, well, if recovery is worth it, if I recover, I need to get all the benefits of recovery. But very often, people aren't willing to do what it takes to get to those benefits. And the thing with metabolic restoration is that, I hate saying this because, of course, everyone wants the metabolism that's working. There's nothing disordered in that. But unfortunately, I see sometimes the eating disorder find a little bit of comfort in knowing, well, if my metabolism is fixed, that means that, can I stay at a lower weight then? Because yeah, the truth is, if your metabolism is extremely suppressed and your body is in storing weight mode, then naturally, of course, you will store more weight than if your metabolism was all repaired, happy, you're at your set point weight, and the weight was kind of just happy with where it is, right? And people with eating disorders look at, for example, typical yo-yo dieters that they know are gaining more weight long-term because of the metabolism being broken, right? Or temporarily suppressed, let's say, not broken. And I just want to take a little moment to investigate what kind of thoughts and feelings are really behind here. Can you see that a lot of it is actually, I hate saying this, but a lot of you can see there actually is a little bit of fat phobia underlying here. Fear of weight gain, a fear of, well, if my metabolism doesn't heal, will I gain then more weight? But then if I have a great metabolism, does that equate to thinness? And first of all, I want to say having a great metabolism equates to being on your set point weight range, right? If you're naturally someone who is smaller, then you will be naturally smaller. If you're naturally someone who's bigger, your metabolism can be amazing, but you still, if your set point is just being in a bigger body, then that's what it is, right? It is true that in recovery, some people experience that their metabolism heals before their body and brain heals, essentially. Not really does it just heal, it actually goes a little bit overboard. So basically what happens is many people in recovery, when the people in recovery who are actually eating quite decent intake, they may notice that the metabolism goes up, weight gain really slows down. It can be very hard to actually put on any weight. And then they're thinking, oh, great, I can eat a lot and maintain this low weight. That is the eating disorder. You have to push the weight gain still if this is happening to you. And I will make an episode on this trap in the future, this trap of being stuck in this hypermetabolic state where you're eating quite a lot more, but you find that you really need to push to gain weight, and you're wondering, well, does this mean that this is just my set point? No. I had this myself. I was underweight. It was not my set point. Basically, I will make an episode where I'm talking about finding the difference between being in hypermetabolism and being at your set point weight and your body literally just being like, hey, we're fine here weight-wise. But anyways, let's get back into it. So what you can see here very often, it is a slightly distorted desire to have that high metabolism because the person is thinking, could this mean that I could, maintain some level of like thinness, And could this mean that I will be able to eat whatever I want without gaining weight? And you know what, if you're in your set point weight range, you can kind of just eat intuitively and eat whatever you want, whenever you want, and you will maintain that weight. So there is some truth to it, but I also think we should investigate what kind of desires are behind it. So again, I don't want to say that if you want your metabolism to be healed in recovery, you are like super fat phobic and that, that is a disordered desire. Of course, we all want metabolism that's working. Be a bit mindful of the underlying thoughts and feelings around it. Because I will sometimes have people coming to me and essentially they want to work with me because they know that I specialize a lot in like metabolic restoration, fixing metabolism, etc., so that they can have a high metabolism and stay skinny and come to the point where with hypermetabolism where they can eat a lot more, still be skinny and just kind of stay stuck there. Please don't think this is recovery. It is not recovery. And your eating disorder is not going to be happy either. You think your eating disorder will be happy here, it will not be. Because then the eating disorder will sprinkle in some guilt as to, oh, why do I need to eat so much? Why am I eating so much more than everyone around me, right? Don't think that this will actually please the eating disorder. It probably wouldn't. So congratulations, you now are not pleasing the eating disorder or recovery. You just have two angry voices in your head screaming, it's a bad deal. It's a very, very bad deal. Please don't make it your mission to essentially increase your metabolism so that you can maintain a weight under your set point weight and eat a higher intake. Don't fall into that trap. And don't think that you can just do that and that your eating disorder won't act up or that it won't be complicated, because eating disorder is not going to be happy about it. So what do you do if you have quote unquote weight restored or quote unquote recovered on a low intake? Interestingly enough, when I talk to people who are fallen a bit into this trap, there seems to be this idea that, oh, let me just relapse and start over, and this time I will do it the right way. No. Nope. Don't even think about it. Bad idea. Very, very bad idea. Don't think of a relapse as some casual little thing you can just casually just do without any consequences. That's not how it works. It's dangerous. And chances are, if you were to have a relapse and start recovery all over again, it wouldn't be like, yeah, this time I feel so ready to eat more. No, you think you would now, but it's actually just your eating disorder trying to lure you back into restriction. Because trust me, I work with people in recovery. They're never really ready to increase their intake. I know your brain will tell you, oh, if I could just start over again. But this is actually just a way to avoid taking action now. Because the truth is, if you are someone who recovered on a quite low intake and you feel like, well, that was my chance, I'm screwed now, that's just not reality. You can still make a change. And here's the thing. If you are energy deprived, you have to increase your intake. It doesn't matter if you are quote unquote weight restored. If you are still experiencing mental and physical symptoms of starvation, you still have to increase your intake. When it comes to metabolism, you can't just think yourself into metabolic repair and metabolic restoration. You have to eat yourself into it, right? You have to signal to your body that there is food coming in an abundance, and it's safe to increase metabolism. It's safe to go out of starvation mode. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, but I'm already weight restored. I'm going to be putting on so much weight, blah, blah, blah. First of all, are you weight restored to your set point weight range? Because remember that we all have a different range our body thrives in. And the thing with this range is that, yes, people may experience an overshot when they are increasing their intake in recovery, if they are so-called quote-unquote weight restored to the set point range. But this is usually just a temporary little overshot that then will taper off. So just a random example. Imagine if your set point range is around a BMI of, let's say, 23, right? Random example. And you have gone through weight restoration on a restrictive way, but you are back at like a BMI of, let's say, 23, around there, right? Plus minus. But you know that you're still energy suppressed. You know that you still need more food. You know that you did recover in a restrictive manner. And you increase your intake. You give in, maybe you have extreme hunger and you just decide, I'm going to give into it. You let go all in, and you notice that you gain a bit of weight. Let's say you go from a BMI of 23 to 25, just random example. But you know that your natural BMI range is more in the 23 than the 25, but temporarily your body is holding on to a bit more weight. And if you just go all in, eat completely unrestricted, and then get your body out of starvation mode, then naturally what will happen is that your body will settle at the range it's comfortable on. So this is why some people actually notice that could be months, could be usually years after recovery, their weight kind of tapers down a bit without them restricting. Because for them, a bit of an overshot was necessary for recovery. Then again, it could be that you think your set point weight range is 23, but your body was actually a lot happier at a BMI of, let's say, 25. And that's completely okay too. The best thing here to do is just to take away that desire to micromanage your body weight, because your body will decide it. Yes, you need to, I guess, micromanage to some extent if you're someone who's underweight in recovery, where you really need to gain weight, really need to push up the weights, even though it's going slow or if it's difficult. Please don't take this as a way of saying, oh, if you're severely underweight in recovery, would just regulate yourself, just eat whatever you want. That's not necessarily always how it works, especially if you're experiencing hypermetabolism. But overall, if you're someone who has weight restored on a low intake, you still need to let go, eat unrestricted, give it time, let your body settle, let your body sort itself out, because eventually it will. You are not going to keep gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining forever, because that's just not how our bodies work. But if you do want to keep gaining forever and ever and ever and ever, then yo-yo dieting, yo-yo restriction cycle, that is a very good way of doing it, because then you're keeping your body in constant starvation mode. Isn't it so ironic that we are essentially prescribing to people for weight loss something that we know is associated with weight gain long term? Not to mention, we are diseasifying a group of people whose bodies are naturally just bigger, Not everyone is naturally under a BMI of 25. Many people are over that, and that doesn't always mean that they are unhealthy or sick or something that needs to be fixed, right? It just means that all bodies are different. And I spoke about this in a bit in the last week's episode, where I speak about what to do when your treatment team holds you back, and what to do when the treatment team is kind of giving you a too low goal BMI. For example, your treatment team is saying, you know what, let's just gain 2 BMI of, let's say, 21, and then we can kind of just keep it there. Well, if your set point is BMI 25, you're still going to be undernourished and very hungry and not fully recovered at the size of BMI, let's say 21. So I think what's so important is you need to trust that your body decides your set point weight range. And I know it can be so difficult to trust that your body knows, that your body has a range it thrives in, when you've spent so long completely ignoring your body and trying to micromanage what is not to be micromanaged. But please don't think that just because you quote unquote weight restored on a very low intake, it is too late for you now. It is not. When you're eating more, your body is getting signals that, hey, the famine is over, we can relax now. Speeds up metabolism. Yes, some people may overshoot a little bit in weight, but if you are overshooting outside or above your set point weight range, then naturally, when your body is detecting there is no famine, food is coming in, it will naturally taper off with time. It's completely normal. And if anything, an overshot is a benefit because it gives some added safety, right? In the Minnesota starvation study, I think the average overshot was around 10% plus minus, meaning some people overshot less, some people didn't overshot, and other people overshot more. But what they did see is that with time and unrestricted eating, the men eventually returned to their pre-starvation weights. So will you always return to the weight you were before your eating disorder? No, because our bodies are supposed to change, obviously. These men were starved for a shorter period. If you, for example, developed your eating disorder during, let's say, puberty, right? It's very natural that your body has a different set point weight range when you're 15 versus 25, right? We know that. That's just how human bodies work. We're not supposed to stay the same size throughout our whole lives. So in the past, I've done an episode on what to do if you're experiencing extreme hunger at a normal weight. So if you are listening to this and you're specifically experiencing extreme hunger, then that episode may be helpful, because I know that a lot of times when people are quote unquote weight restored, but they did so at a restrictive intake, very often they feel very hungry. Not always, but often. So if you are experiencing extreme hunger, then definitely check that episode out, because then I'll talk a bit more about that specific experience. But extreme hunger or not, if you know that you are still energy restricted, you know you're still in that saving mode, you know your metabolism is still low, you have symptoms of starvation, mental and physical symptoms of starvation, or it could be just one of them. Some people don't necessarily have strong physical symptoms of starvation. They may have, that might be sorted, but they're still noticing mentally they have a lot of restriction symptoms, a lot of disordered thoughts and urges. It is not too late to work on it. You do not have to relapse and go back. And if you do, don't expect that suddenly this time you will feel ready to do recovery, quote unquote, the right way. Because trust me, the eating disorder is always going to try and find a way to sneak in. So now I'm going to take a listener question. It kind of ties a bit into this week's episode, but also really ties into last week's episode about what to do when your treatment professionals actually kind of hold you back. So to paraphrase, the person is essentially saying that their doctor set their goal weight at a BMI that is still quite low. I'm not going to say the exact BMI in case it's triggering, but it is, the typical case of treatment professionals setting a goal weight that is very much in the lower end. And this person then proceeded to ask the doctor, okay, well, what if I go above this? And then the doctor said, well, then we raise activity or lower the intake. Wow. First of all, to the person who sent this in, I am so sorry to hear that you got that said from a doctor that's supposed to protect you and be on your team, who's clearly taking the side of the eating disorder here. I'm very, very sorry to hear that. I want to remind you that even though there are so many amazing doctors out there that are so knowledgeable about eating disorders, trust me, they exist. There are also a lot of them that have absolutely no clue. And the person also mentioned that they are in a country where there's not really that much knowledge about eating disorders in the medical system, which is a lot of countries, but they mentioned that as well. And, I kind of answered this question in more detail in last week's episode, but I want to just say once again, full recovery means reaching your body's natural set point weight range. What your doctor or therapist or dietitian whatsoever sets as a weight goal does not really matter. It makes sense setting a goal weight in terms of this is the minimum you need to be at to be medically safe. Yeah, that makes sense. But these goals should not be maximums. They are minimums, not maximums. I would also argue that the minimums are often too low. Most people can't balance on the border of normal and underweight and expect a full, healthy life mentally and physically. I know your eating disorder might wish you could, but it's just not realistic. And equally, if you're intentionally suppressing your weight, how can you be fully recovered? Because you're essentially doing a disordered behavior. How can you be fully recovered yet engage in a disordered behavior, right? So as I spoke about in last week's episode, the reason why doctors and other professionals sometimes set these low weights and kind of say, well, if you go above it, we will just lower your intake or increase activity, is because they think you cannot handle being above it. It is not because they necessarily think that it is bad to be above their intake, because these people are in 95% of the cases, they are above that BMI themselves, right? So it's not like they think it's quote unquote unhealthy to be above it. It's just that they fear that you can't handle more weight gain. And again, I explained this paradox more in last week's episode. So if you haven't listened to that yet, definitely give it a listen. But essentially what I see time and time again is that when someone is actually weight restoring to the set point weight range, they're very much able to handle that. But what people often struggle with is being, in the process of weight restoration, when someone is kind of unsure, what is my set point weight? Should I stay here? Well, maybe I look normal now, That is usually where people struggle the most. And as I said in last week's episode, you kind of have two choices. You can be like, okay, my doctor said this BMI, and then just follow what the doctor is saying. But you are going to be the one who suffer the consequences. Your doctor will be fine. Your doctor will go home to their life, right? But you're the one who's going to suffer the consequences of suppressing your natural set point weight range. And I also want to remind you that doctors are not gods. For example, I have dysautonomia, basically failure of my autonomous nervous system. And I remember I described one of my kind of half seizure collapse episodes. I had one POTS episode where basically lost consciousness, lost balance, had contractions, kind of almost fainted. And the doctor I explained it to said, I don't know what that is like. Sounds like it could be a panic attack. What? What? I could have just accepted that. And you know what? To be completely honest, for some time I did. I thought I was just going crazy. And I didn't really seek out any more medical support. And guess who suffered the consequences of that? Me. I was the one who was suffering for years because I just took whatever the doctor said as the truth. I was thinking, well, maybe I just have a very strange form of panic attacks that manifest in seizure-like symptoms. Maybe that could be a thing. But thank God, eventually I got to see other doctors that were more knowledgeable. And they're like, hey, what's actually happening is that your brain is not getting oxygen and you need to be on beta blocker medications. Please take it from someone who has previously been given a bit of a dismissive explanation from a doctor. And this has happened more than just that case. It also happened during my eating disorder. Take it from someone who has been kind of doctors just saying, oh, it's fine, and then suffer the consequences of thinking, well, my doctor said it was fine, so I'm just going to keep living. I'm probably crazy. I'm probably, I've lived the consequence of that. Don't fall into that trap, because guess who suffered? Me, not my doctor. My doctor was fine. I was not fine. Find a doctor to work with if you can that is actually supportive of recovery. And if you have a GP that is just not supportive, you can still kind of use them as an ally in your recovery in terms of getting your blood samples done, refer you if necessary, prescribe any medications that you may need. Also make sure that you have at least one person that is on your team and not the eating disorder teams, that is pushing you, that is saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to settle for just kind of semi-quasi recovery. We're going to go fully there. And unfortunately, that person isn't always going to be a doctor, because doctors don't always know. And I try to also be a bit compassionate towards doctors, that they don't always get it because they have so much that they need to understand. So for example, the doctor that missed my dysautonomia, I don't blame them. I know that it's difficult to know because there's so many different things, and you often will go to what seems like the most logical conclusion. You go to what seems like the most common condition, right? Your doctor knows that you have a fear of weight gain, a fear of food. So they're going to think, hey, well, how can I work with you in managing this? So we're going to allow you to stay below your set point weight, restricting a little bit. We just want to keep you medically safe, right? Unfortunately, that's how a lot of doctors work, and they think that they are on your team by doing this, but you probably know that that's not really the case. And then you need to think, well, what is best for me? Because chances are deep inside you know what's best for you. And if not, you wouldn't have even asked me, would you? If you knew that, okay, my doctor's right, there was no doubt in your head, then you wouldn't have had the urge to ask, to be curious about this, right? Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.